My name is John Grimes, and I'm the Chief Executive of the Smart Energy Council and the Renewable Energy Council Asia Pacific. Welcome this afternoon. First, an acknowledgement of the Indigenous peoples around the world. This is something that is a work in progress, and much more work must be done. There needs to be justice for Indigenous people in every jurisdiction, in every country, right around the world. And so I pay my respects to all Indigenous and First Nations people here with us today, and stand in solidarity with the Indian communities of the Amazon, who have been such a powerful and moral voice at this COP, telling us the reality of the impact on them, on climate change, destruction of culture, and being cut out of economic development opportunities. So welcome. I've got an app on my phone. It's called Flight Radar 24. And when you look at it, you can actually see every aeroplane in the world that's in the sky. And it's unbelievable. The sky around the world is absolutely chock-a-block full of aeroplanes at any point in time. And the emissions that aviation industry have are extraordinary. But they are only 1/3 of the emissions that is produced by the steel industry globally. Steel accounts for 7 to 9% of global emissions. If steel were a country, it would be the 3rd largest emitter in the world. And I think it is so apt today that we are coming together to talk about green steel in Brazil. Because together, Brazil and Australia account for, get this, 80% of the renewable energy, of the iron ore in the world. And so that's a staggering figure, 80%. We must be partners in the transition globally to green steel. We must forge the alliances that make green steel a reality. We also know in the Asia Pacific, the economies are shifting and shifting fast. India, Japan, South Korea, Vietnam, China. Big players moving in a very substantive way. So the opportunity for us, friends, is to build the coalition, the international coalition, to make green steel, green iron, a reality, to put the supply chains together, to connect the producers with the refiners, with customers right around the world. And if we do that, there is a massive, massive economic opportunity for all of us at hand. Because Brazil and Australia will no longer be digging up dirt and sending it overseas. We'll be value adding by incorporating the world's cheapest renewable energy in Brazil, in Australia, in China, to add value to that resource and massively boost our economies, create economic development for our people, and to support our important government work. So I'm super proud to be here in Brazil with this agenda. I think also there is a possibility of a tripartite leadership agreement between Australia, Brazil, and China. China is critical, and China is moving quickly. And I know firsthand from being in the electric vehicle industry in China, from being in the steel industry in China, they are hungry for zero emissions inputs. They get it. They understand the existential threat to the planet, but they understand also the economic opportunity of embracing the transition to green steel. So it is with great pleasure that I'm opening this panel. I'm just so excited to have everybody together for this discussion. There'll be a bit of a discussion, but also an opportunity for some Q&A. So put your thinking caps on and think about how you can participate in the discussion. Finally, I just say, at the Renewable Energy Council Asia Pacific, this is why we exist. It's to put together the multinational supply chains and opportunities to crystallize people for action, because we're interested in outcomes, not process. We're interested in people of goodwill working together. That's our mission, and I'm very proud to be here today and to be working with the panel. I'd like to now introduce our moderator, Tom Woodruff. Tom Woodruff is the International Senior Advisor at the Smart Energy Council, an extraordinarily talented diplomat with deep connections internationally. There is nobody better for moderating a session like this, especially across this ecosystem, than Tom Woodruff. Welcome, Tom.
Thanks so much, John, and thank you all for being here. We've only got about 40 minutes, and we've got extraordinary humidity and heat, so I want to get right down to business. As John set the context really well, the purpose here is not just to have a parochial Australian discussion, but to also have very much a global discussion, obviously with particular Chinese and Brazilian dimensions to that. I'm going to introduce also each of the speakers as we go, but I wanted to begin with the gentleman to my right, Marcelo Feodet. Marcelo is the former National Secretary of Climate and International Affairs in the Brazilian Environment Ministry, and is now doing a whole bunch of other equally important things, but in many ways has also dodged a bullet insofar as he's put so many of the plans of this gathering in place, but has none of the responsibility for their execution this week, which is why he's also breathing a bit of a sigh of relief. But Marcelo, can you begin by just setting for us a bit more of the Brazilian context? You've obviously got a new green industrial strategy. Can you talk us through how green steel sits within that, what you sort of see as Brazil's comparative advantage within that market? And third of all, you know, particularly being mindful of the fact that we are here in this state, it reminds us that Brazil is a federation, and how is there the alignment between your federal and state policies and programs as part of the implementation of that green industrial strategy? So over to you first.
Thanks very much, Tom. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the introduction. I'm super excited to be here, to be honest, as we were talking like previously. I think I don't believe in coincidence, but it's kind of a coincidence, so I think it's a sign that we are moving to a right place to get invited for this panel through Connor. I've devoted all my career to the green agenda. In Brazil, I'm graduated with one of the first environmental management course. Hello? Better. Well, I'm trying to answer what you asked, but I need to share some things with you guys, and I want to appreciate that we have here the officer from UN, CCC, Alex Paris. He's a great guy that is developing amazing work related to the innovation, global innovation hub for climate change from UN. I'm gonna talk about this later with you guys a little better. But to go straight to the point, I think probably for everyone's pretty obviously the Brazil has an amazing electric matrix, everybody knows. Great energy matrix. But at the same time, when it comes to steel, I think we share a lot of similarities with Australia. Because besides the fact we have a lot of green energy, renewable energy, and potential to do it and to develop more, we have a national characteristic that we can have like biomass. So the biomass is really the key, you know, because I think develop green energy, okay, everybody's trying to do it, and to be honest, Brazil is like 30 years in front, most of the countries. But again, because the local characteristics, geographic characteristics, but when you add energy, when you add clean energy with the capability to grow renewable biomass, renewable char, instead of fossil coal, I think this is super important for Brazil. When it comes to Brazil, I think these two things together is what really brings like this potential for Brazil, okay? But this is just something that it's kind of a natural gathering and a geographic gathering. But besides that, what we are seeing are like the local stakeholders starting to engage to develop this and really treat this as a special and strategic thing. The government, as you said, like each state has its rules. We don't have a consolidated rule for everybody when it comes to this issue. Normally, the states, they follow the federal, but we still don't have a specific agreement for that, let's say, okay? But I think that anyway, besides that, and I would never sit and be counting on that because I think this, normally on my experience and after some years on the chair, on the machine, you know, we just start to learn that it's much better to go and do it than to be waiting for the government do something, to be honest. It's so hard. Like, so hard to engage everybody and develop huge agendas. And normally in my experience in the climate agenda, what I've been seeing is that like the private sector pushing and just doing and moving forward. Because in the end of the day, we're talking about great business opportunity here. So is this what we're talking about? It's business, it's strategic business opportunity. We had a project inside the secretary called the Sustainable Steel Project with GCF fund, and we developed some years research regarding how to turn better the biochar to add it like competitivity to the production. But it's just like a small scale project, you know. But while we were doing this, like the huge companies are moving much faster. I just came from Rio de Janeiro before COP, before Belém, because we had the first Global Innovation Forum from UN. So it's the first time UN get together the whole world network for climate innovation to have a forum together. So we had a 2 days forum in Rio with the government of Rio, the governor making the open remarks, and more than almost 1,000 people together from all around the world just talking about innovation. And it was amazing to see how we had the steel sector engaged and trying to promote and to speak about green steel. So again, I don't believe in coincidences. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Super interesting. Thank you so much. Joanna, if I can turn to you. Joanna, by the way, for everyone's benefit, is the International Director at the Superpower Institute in Australia. Superpower being renewable energy superpower is the objective. Joanna also happens to be an alumnus of the Smart Energy Council, where she did so much to build up our international profile and work, and particularly built out everything that the council was doing on hydrogen, of which she's a massive leading authority in Australia, and has just, as an institute, just put out this little beautiful booklet and report, which is frankly a really seminal contribution, I think, in this debate and agenda, I should say, rather, back home. Joanna, Australia has also just adopted a green industrial strategy. Ours is called the Future Made in Australia policy. There's a bit of a trend amongst particularly some of the G20 nations around the world in doing so. Can you set out, particularly for some of the folks who may not be so familiar with that in the audience, can you set out some of the elements of that and sort of look at whether that sets the right policy foundations for us to really seize this agenda going forward, or is there more that needs to be done?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me today. It's a pleasure. Can everyone hear me? All right. Yeah, it's good. Just before I commence, I just want to make an acknowledgement of First Nation and Indigenous women, recognise their role particularly as the fabric of community and heartbeat of those relationships as well. Let me just start and go back a little bit. Tom, you talked about the Superpower Institute and who we are. So we're a relatively new policy and economic institute in Australia, but we were set up by Australia's eminent economist Ross Garnaut and public policy expert Rod Sims only a few years ago. But I think we've released some really great reports and data, particularly our Green Iron report, that really shows where the economic opportunity is for Australia. So we see how do we use these superpower industries or these big industrial processes that we can decarbonise, and what does that mean for the rest of the world and our role in that from an economic lens. So as Tom pointed out, we do have our Green Iron report, but we also released a new energy trade piece as well, written by Dr. Ruben Finnegan late last year, which shows all of those industries covering green fuels as well as aluminium, green iron, copper, etc., etc. So all of those pieces of that conversation roll into this Future Made in Australia legislation, which was brought in a few budgets ago. I think it's around $26 billion worth of funding, certainly broken up into sectoral approaches. I think the interesting piece and the most important message with the Future Made in Australia is that it's a future made with our trading partners. And I think we cannot see Australia and our leadership and our work in silo with everyone else in the region as well. From our perspective, we think that the Future Made in Australia is a great legislation, and it's certainly the first thing that we need to do to take these industries forward. But there are some other things missing. So we did see the release of our national determined contributions, our NDCs, a few weeks ago. I think they were announced. And Rod Sims came out and said, well, these are great, but in order to actually achieve these NDCs, we do need some changes in policy. So our Green Iron report identified 5 recommendations, the first being a production tax credit for green iron at $170 per tonne, which could actually be banked with existing production tax credits for hydrogen. So the hydrogen production tax incentive, which marks at about $2 per kilo for hydrogen produced. The second thing that we recommended was actually a CAPEX funding, so capital funding upfront, capped at $500 million, or about 30% of capital funding for these first movers. Like you mentioned, in Brazil, having first movers are critically important for scale. They're incredibly important to learn and de-risk the industry. So we certainly see some opportunities to get those projects up and running very quickly. Our third recommendation was around green hydrogen certifications, so that you can actually see the hydrogen that you're being produced, and you can actually offset it in different localities to be able to afford you the opportunity to produce green iron at point of production. We also talked a little bit about common use infrastructure as one of our recommendations. Who's going to pay for it? What does it look like? I think that's a really great point that you made about Brazil, particularly the energy matrix and infrastructure matrix. It's something that we find challenging in Australia. We do have these industrial renewable energy zones, which are great. South Australia is leading with some state development areas as well that are critically important, particularly in areas like the Eyre Peninsula and Upper Spencer Gulf. And our final recommendation is something similar to what John said, is, international diplomacy on these issues. I think, we have a very similar economy like Brazil, and we certainly have a similar economy to India and others in Africa as well. And so if you can think about where the COP presidency might find itself over the next 4 or 5 years, there is certainly a legacy piece that we can feed into and make sure that this is a piece not just for Australia but for our region. We're really keen to see some kind of Asian carbon border adjustment mechanism, similar to that's happened in Europe. We certainly want to see a price on carbon. That is something we feel very firmly about. And we're about to release a carbon solutions levy report in the next few weeks. So I won't give you any hot insights just yet. I might talk about it later today, but be keeping an eye out for that. That will be an incredible report on some of the policy mechanisms which are needed in order to activate this industry in Australia.
Thanks so much. And just because you mentioned Asian CBAM, shout out to Tim Buckley and his crew at Climate Energy Finance, who've put out a really equally seminal report on that particular idea recently as well. Lee Schwal, one of my dearest friends, he also happens to be probably, I would say, the world's leading expert in terms of analysing and interpreting and influencing China's climate and energy system from the outside. He is the founding director of something called the China Climate Hub at the Asia Society Policy Institute in New York. Li Shuao, can you situate this from the Chinese perspective for us? Obviously, China produces over half of the world's steel, but there's changes afoot. What is driving those changes? How is China seeking to embed that within its own industrial strategy? And if you could make this slightly parochial for our Australian audience, Prime Minister Albanese's visit to China in July launched something called the Steel Decarbonising Dialogue. It'd be really useful if you could just situate a little bit what that outcome actually achieved, but also what got China into a place of that being something that is really useful for them to see going forward as well. Over to you.
Sure, Tom. I hope everybody can hear me okay. Let me maybe try to make three points. Number one, on China's domestic situation. I think for an Australian audience, the most important message here is China is really planning a steady, very predictable, politically sustainable low-carbon strategy over the long term, all the way to the mid of this century, the carbon neutrality goal set by the Chinese government. And we are at the end of the first phase, I would say, the beginning of the second phase. And the first phase is very simple, large-scale integration of renewable energy in China's power system. And now that we're entering into the second phase, I think we'll begin to see renewable energy like wind and solar squeezing out coal. And also a key feature in the second phase is we are going to see political attention shifting from the power sector to other industrial sectors as well, in particular steel, and to a lesser extent, cement and so on. So definitely expecting in the next few years further action, further attention on steel sector decarbonization. Some of the colleagues may know that China has a domestic emission trading system. They are going to expand the coverage of the ETS around 2027, and you will cover this, the steel sector. There will be a carbon price on that. And another important point here, we think about the so-called hard-to-abate sector. I want to invite us to think about the China speed, right? When you look at steel decarbonization, I think the intellectual trap is, you look around the world, not a lot of, developments, certainly not as dramatic and rapid as wind and solar, right? But think about where we were when we think about wind and solar 10, 15 years ago. Very nascent sector, new technology, far from being, deployed in a market, sustainable way. All of these perceptions have been debunked by by China over the last 10 years. Whether that dynamic will be, replicated when it comes to steel sector decarbonization, I think our Australian friends will need to bear that in mind. On the political relationship between Australia and China, let me just say there are a few notable things. One is, of course, the bilateral relationship has suffered from geopolitical turbulences over the last couple of years, but it is on a stabilizing trajectory, which I think is really good. It's also underpinned by real and strong economic synergy between the two countries. Australia is also a very notable country in that it is probably at the very forefront in terms of stabilizing or even improving its relationship with China among key Western countries. And I just want to kind of encourage us to think about that in the context of a potential Australian COP next year. And of course, the third thing here in the Australia-China relationship is the commercial relationship on key commodities, in particular iron ore. I see a lot of synergy between the two sides. I see a potential for Australia to actually help and accelerate China to decarbonize the iron and steel sector in the coming years. And hopefully we can take advantage of the potential Australian presidency of the COP next year. Let me just say the last point. I guess just on the panel, I'm not the Chinese government, but I may kind of represent the Chinese perspective, the buyer's perspective, right? In the context of iron and steel, I would just urge everyone to think about China not just a buyer. I think if we limit China just as a buyer in the context of Sino-Australian iron and steel relationship, the decarbonization agenda may not go as far as we would like to. Think about China as a potential investor as well. That's, I think, the key message.
Yeah, it's super helpful. I want to, Joanna, you come in on that point.
Yeah, I completely agree, and certainly a partner. I just wanted to have a little share a little story with you. I had the opportunity to chat to Ross Garnaut, who was our previous ambassador in China under the Hawke government in the 1980s, when they were talking about the original iron ore boom. And everyone was saying it's really difficult to do, and China's not going to want to buy our iron ore. And they were having these conversations in Beijing 40 odd years ago, and it's nice to see that we're having these conversations again, and we see China as a critical partner in this. And certainly all the conversations that I've been having with Chinese industry, they're very much ready for the offtake, right? They've got the supply routes, they've got the trading relationship, they want the offtake, but they also want to partner in these projects and build out in Australia.
Yeah, I want to come back to that investment point in a minute. And also I want to pick up on the COP31 possibilities that you mentioned too, Li Shuao. Marcelo, we are obviously here at COP30. You've painted a very good picture before of Brazil's interest in this entire agenda. How is Brazil seeking to progress any of this stuff here in Belém? And to John's point earlier around the possibilities for something trilaterally in terms of a future pledge or alike, how does that factor in as well?
Well, I'm going to share with you guys. I'm going to invite everybody here to engage, because what we are doing in a concrete steps. In life, we always need to look at the big picture, but we need to land it on the ground. And I think we've been working to land the progress of this agenda on the ground. And what I want to share with you guys is that since last year, I'm the focal point in Brazil for the Global Climate Change Innovation Hub from UN, FCCC, and I've been in charge of developing the agenda on the ground in Brazil. Okay, so it was like a work that starts like slow, tiny, and it's just growing fast, bigger. And we just had like the first Global Innovation Forum in Rio, like last week. Not last week, like before COP. And what's the beauty of the initiative is that through this work of innovation with UN in Brazil, Vale is one of our major supports to develop the work here in Brazil. Aperan, what it's a large green steel producer, low carbon intensive producer in Brazil, they were together with us on the forum and showcasing their business and everything. So it came through the development of this network here in Brazil. It came through the stakeholders. It came the idea and the provocation, like the challenge to how can we move the green steel agenda. Okay, so this year we start to work on idea to launch a green steel pledge, like we did in Glasgow. I was together with John Kerry signing the methane pledge in COP26 in Glasgow. And then we came out with the idea that, what can we do, like a alliance for, like we're talking about climate innovations in the UN hub, so, but when you talk about innovation, it's super important. It's part of the mandate, the regulation, and the policy innovation. And then what starts with a brainstorm, a think tank, evolved to, after talking with the UN guys and everything, evolved to the possibility for us to launch a green steel pledge. But we didn't have enough time to develop this, engage everybody this year, but it's a work already happening. The Vale guy, the head of global decarbonization of Vale, should be here with us. He just had another something that happened, but I think it's super important to have a huge global player like them together, okay? And also the UN guys. That's why I was glad to see Mr. Alex, that he was here, because he's like the guy that stays in the headquarters in Bonn, working with the innovation agenda. So I want to invite you all to engage. So that's why for me, I'm super glad to be here today, because I think we have the opportunity to exchange, to be together, and to bring stakeholders. Like I still pledge that we will only work if we have like the major gorillas on the room, like playing together and working together. And China as a big player, investor, not just a buyer. I love to hear that, So that's it. I just wanted to invite everybody. Let's come together. And we have like a pathway from here to Australia, maybe, to have this. I think will be super impactful, and meaningful and like concrete step. You know, because what I learned through the methane pledge is that it's a huge concrete step. It really pushed the agenda. It really pushed the agenda. When I signed the methane pledge and got back home, like people was like cursing like crazy, like your responsibility, why are you signing on methane stuff, like the cattle people, you know, they were not understanding what was going on. But it proved it to be like a huge opportunity, super business opportunity. And after this, when you have like a global agreement, then when you go back to your parties, then you can structure the local policy. So I'm just replicating in my mind the experience. I'm not just like dreaming about. I think we already had this journey with methane. So after we got back to Brazil after the methane pledge, then I developed together with the minister like the methane zero program, we call it. Okay, so it's a program to induce the best use of organic residues in Brazil to produce methane and to avoid methane in the atmosphere. And it's super successful. Like several years, like we're talking about 3-4 years later, the agenda, it got super strong in Brazil. Super strong agenda in Brazil, the methane agenda. And I think we're going to do pretty much the same thing with the steel.
And Lee, just on the points you made before around investment, can you tease that out a little bit for us? I mean, Joanna made the point, you know, offtake agreements are not necessarily going to be enough here. What do you think, and, you know, completely take the point, obviously you're not here representing the Chinese government, but you've got unique insights into, I think, how the Chinese system thinks about these kind of questions. What do you think is the kind of level of engagement, co-investment, skin in the game, to speak more broadly, that the Chinese need to see? Second question is COP31. We've heard a global opportunity here. As it relates to Australia, China, do you see the backdrop of COP31, maybe not obviously an initiative outcome there, but certainly in the backdrop of a hopeful Australian presidency, how do you see that steel decarbonisation dialogue that the Prime Minister established in July best being able to be accelerated? Is this something which we can really see catalysed in the next 12 months?
Sure, Tom. On the investment question, a few big trends, right? Number one, colleagues here need to understand that Chinese companies in general, but in particular in the clean tech sector, they're really the international champions and leaders now. But they have one vulnerability. They're facing a cutthroat, fierce domestic competition. They all try to go abroad. They all try to sell their products abroad, and they're also trying to seek business opportunities, investment opportunities, abroad. That's big trend number one. Big trend number two, the Australia-China diplomatic relationship on the stabilization trajectory. If you want to stabilize or even improve this relationship further, investment plays a very significant and strategic role. What we have seen, for example, during Prime Minister Albanese's visit earlier this year to China, is that Chinese companies expressed very strong willingness to consider Australia as an investment destination. They see Australia in general as a high investment return destination. And specifically for the green iron steel agenda, whether investment opportunities can be identified in the mineral processing, refining, part of the supply chain. And if Chinese investors can, help further scale up the deployment of wind and solar, the green energy transition in Australia, that is critically needed, right, to deliver green iron. That's another area. Your second question, this relationship in the context of a potential Australian COP31 presidency. Look, we are here at COP30. I would say this is really the first COP in the new phase of global politics, but also new global climate politics. A lot of people are talking about how do we transition the COP as a political process, noting that the negotiation agenda is increasingly delivering, completing its mandate. What I would argue from next year on is for all of us to think about the COP not only as a climate negotiation forum, but also as a trade fair. Instead of landing the very important language of tripling renewable energy and doubling energy efficiency in a COP decision, how about 3 solar farms, 3 solar projects in Australia that is concretely financed by someone that can be scaled up and deployed? Instead of, in addition to the COP presidency traveling around the world throughout the year, advocating for how you land important decisions on a piece of paper. How about also a trade mission in parallel with that to actually deliver concrete projects that works in the interest of the host country, economic interest of the host country of the COP.
Thanks so much. I'm going to turn to the audience in a moment just to chime in if they've got any questions. First, I just want to ask Joanna one more and Marcelo one more. Joanna, on this investment piece, particularly in Australia, I think the elephant in the room, or should I say the panda in the room, is the Foreign Investment Review Board. How does a country like Australia best balance what is our long-term economic interests here with obviously our short-term national security concerns as well?
Yeah, it's a really great question, Tom. I think, like to your point, the relationship with China is really strong, and we're in a new kind of geopolitical world at the moment. We've seen shifts in perhaps world order around trade. We've seen shifts around political systems globally, and I think that Australia needs to be responding to that in the way that we accept investment, and we need to perhaps review some of the requirements that the FIRB has, because I do understand it does take a while to get through. I think the most important thing is thinking about what is the strategic opportunity for Australia and thinking about that at a federal level, and I know states are also looking at that. What is the state development funds that they need to do, and looking at each project with the lens that what it means for the country, and certainly those relationships as well. I just also wanted to talk a little bit about the COP31 outcomes and what that could potentially look like, because I think there's a really big opportunity to, yes, do something trilaterally, but also think about all of the countries along the industrial sunbelt, and also think about it from a national and subnational level as well, so that you can accelerate that kind of opportunity. One of the things that we've been looking at the Superpower Institute is what are the trading platforms that could actually accelerate these kind of these markets, so that you could actually have trade happening in open forums, particularly as a platform for COP31, whether that be a trade accord or something similar to what they did with hydrogen and in H2H as well. But if we're going to start talking about trading or having pledges with green iron, we need to agree on what the standard is. And I just want to give a shout out to GH2, the Global Green Hydrogen Organisation, who released on Saturday their green iron standard, which recognises that green iron needs to be produced with renewables and not produced with gas, and that's certainly our position. And I think it's really important if we do have pledges and we do have agreements that we are all agreeing to that effect as well.
Super important point. Marcelo, let's be quick on this, but I don't know if you're a West Wing fan, but President Bartlett says there's rarely days which are black and white, and often they're the days that end in body counts. But with that, let me ask you a black and white question. There's a trade-off here between what effort do we put into these large national sovereign efforts to develop the frameworks for these kind of outcomes versus what we do just to get on with the job in terms of the commercial arrangements, the real market, if you will. How do you see that trade-off from Brazil's perspective?
Well, Tom, it's like I was sharing at the beginning today. I think it's all together now. You need to push from everywhere. So we need to move forward as private sector, never be standing still waiting for things to happen. But at the same time, I think we need to take this opportunity. We need to take the opportunity of Australia presidency, and move the institutional agenda forward with parties, local, local policies, local government, but again, as much as pathways we take, it's better. I never believe that only government action solves, but I think you always need the government actions. But again, it's what I told you, that my experience with the methane was something like this. You have like it's more of a private sector push, and then the government starts to see, okay, this is good, this is nice, it can be an opportunity. But the timetable is different normally. I think we should do what we're doing, everybody engaged, push, 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 and whatever happens first, great, and whatever happens second, great too.
That's what we call the Great Australian Hedge, but important nevertheless. Is there any questions from the audience? Somehow, I think a microphone's going to miraculously be taken from my hands.
Thank you, and thank you all for your time. I had a question, I think more for Joanna and Lee as well, but on an individual level, how can we as Australians take advantage of this opportunity of both Future Made in Australia and the Chinese desire for investment? What training and areas should we be kind of looking into to both make the best for ourselves and maximize Australia's potential?
Thank you for letting me go first on that one. I think the opportunity is really around, there's a lot of technology. If you think about it as an individual level, one of Australia's greatest exports is our talent, right? And China is much the same. So if we can continue to do great collaboration across technology, innovation, particularly through our university sector, I think that will be incredible. I think as individuals, it's tricky because we don't really see ourselves as individuals that affect, big industrialized processes. But I think it's just being aware of the opportunity, and also perhaps, I think sometimes in our media we get a raw deal of our relationship with China, and I think it's a really important one. And I think we need to come up with some productive ways forward to engage in a really clear and concise way, but one that's both economically beneficial for both of us. It's a great relationship. It's a very long relationship. We've certainly been through a lot together as two countries, and I think it's one of our strongest trading partnerships, and we should be certainly leaning into that a little bit more as a nation.
Very quick and simple message as an individual. Do China studies at college, and try to understand not only the Australia-China or China-West political relationship, but the deeply rooted industrial and economic strengths of China and the implication of that to the global carbon transition. Based on that, think about where Australia fit into all this, how to balance indeed, as others said, the economic opportunities and the geopolitical challenges. No simple answer to that question, but just to realize and fully appreciate the complexity, in particular the economic side. I have an impression that we are all very good at the geopolitical analysis. We know the geopolitical situation is very contentious, but also keep an eye on industrialization, economic strengths on the Chinese side.
Thank you. Any other questions in the audience? This lady over here.
Thank you. I am a dual Brazilian-Australian citizen with the Australia-Brazil Chamber of Commerce. And I wanted to mention the role of capital also from Australia. We have the world's 4th largest pension system. And right now, for various reasons, it's challenging to unlock. But I wanted to throw an example, maybe for a Brazilian comment. Our largest investment bank, Macquarie Bank, developed a joint venture, an equity joint venture with Norsk Hydro called Hydro Rain. And they are now building Ventos de São Zacarias, a huge wind farm with solar, with offtake from a Hydro Rain-owned alumina and bauxite facility in the northeast of Brazil. And it strikes me that joint ventures that involve joint investment with China and Australia are a further way to de-risk. And if there's a way of bringing Brazilian expertise as well, then maybe we can find a way to go a bit far from the politics and closer to the economics. And maybe, actually, Joanna is the best person to answer this. How can we unlock pension money from Australia, such a vast size, to make that come true?
Thank you. Is there anyone from anyone else could answer that? I will actually go to the panel to answer that one. But look, I think it's just pressure, right? Let's try and get them to unlock that funding. There's a huge amount of capital there. We should be leaning on it, et cetera, et cetera. But I just want to point out, I went to Jakarta this year, and I was with some Brazilian colleagues. And one of the things I really enjoyed was that we were both middle powers, and we both had very similar economies. And there's a lot of work that we can do together bilaterally that actually could significantly change the course of this sector, particularly, and in light of if we host a COP31 next year. But anyone else have any other comments?
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks a lot. I didn't know about this. Great to hear. Again, I think we need to approach in everywhere that we can, from every front, you know. And I'm truly enthusiastic about like concrete economic solutions. You know, we'll never move forward with the agenda if we don't have good business on the table, concrete solutions, you know, great feasibility, feasibility of economic feasibility. I'm just seeing, for example, Juliana is here. She's from a Brazilian company called Oma Group, and she's developing a fund for recycling. And one of her major projects, it's a recycling of scraps of steel, for example, for recycling steel. So, for example, for China, this should be interest business, you know, and they're developing a lot of. She's developed the first recycling credits through VEHA projects in Brazil, this kind of things. So a lot of initiatives going on that you don't depend to be waiting. I know that she just brought you like this 1 trillion question, how to deblock the money from the pension funds. We all want to know, and I think we're trying. But in the meanwhile, we can start to develop our initiatives, you know, because if it's good business, then you're going to find money somehow, you know. But it needs to be good business. Otherwise, I don't think it's sustainable on long terms. That's why I'm passionate about the innovation agenda, because innovation is how can I have innovative financial tools, for example? How can I have innovative policies? How can I have technological innovations? Because normal innovations come with economic sustainability.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm a firm believer in finishing on time, and we're 1 minute over, so I'm going to end it there. Can you please join with me in thanking all of the panelists, and thank you also for coming here today.